All right, go ahead and open to our first source or our first map. Go ahead and give your paper a nice crease. This is source number 1, the Mercator map. Put your finger where it says head note on your paper. Head note, your finger should be here. Head note is kind of like an introduction. I'm going to read. If I pause, fill in the missing word. It's probably easier to follow along on your paper than the screen. Gerardus Mercator created the Mercator projection map in... Mercator was a Flemish cartographer and mathematician. A cartographer is a map maker. And here we can see a picture of good old Gerardus. Next paragraph. Mercator created this map to help navigate ships through the... Mercator stretched the lines of latitude and longitude to create... This made it very easy to sail from Europe to other... Third paragraph. Mercator lived during a time of European expansion and European governments colonized or different places around the world, such as India, parts of Africa, parts of Mexico, and parts of the United States. Here's the map. We looked at it yesterday. We noticed yesterday that the size of Greenland is way too big compared to Africa. At the bottom is the attribution. We can see the title of this map in the Flemish language, so I'm not going to try and read it, that it was made by Gerardus Mercator in 1579. All right, get out your pencil. If you have a highlighter, you can use that too, or just a pencil is fine. We're going to start by looking at the origin. So who made this map? Well, if I look over here, I can see the person who made it is this guy, Gerardus Mercator. So I'm going to either highlight or underline, up to you. Gerardus Mercator. You should have highlighted it or underlined it too. And I'm going to annotate or write a little note that says who. Make sure your paper looks like mine, that you've highlighted Gerardus Mercator and written who. My next question is, when was this map created? Over here, 1579, you can highlight it or underline it, and you should annotate or write yourself a little note in the text when it was created. And the last question is, where was the map created? It says he was Flemish. That means he was from Europe. So I'm going to write where. Make sure your paper is marked up just like mine. So for who created the map, put a bullet point. You're going to say Gerardus Mercator, this guy. And this is notes, so you don't have to write complete sentences. When, bullet point, 1579, that is a long time ago, like 500 years ago. And where was it created? In Europe. Make sure you've written that on your paper. Moving on to the purpose. Why was this map created? Why did he make this map? It says right here in the text, why did he make it? There's a few things you could highlight. I'm going to choose this one. He made it to help sailors navigate ships through the oceans. I'm going to write myself a note there. That's why he made it. So I'm going to put a note here now that I've highlighted and annotated, so you should have writing and highlighting or underlining here. And I'm going to write to help sailors in the ocean. You could write that in your own words. That's totally fine. These are just notes, so I don't have to use complete sentences with capitals and periods. Also, totally fine to write that in your own words. Okay, this is the real thinking now that historians do. Value. What is helpful about this map? What's helpful? Well, here it said that it was easy to use a compass, like a north, east, south, west, to sail. So that's helpful. So I'm going to write a note here that says good for sailing. Again, feel free to put that in your own words if you want. And something else that stuck out to me that was really, really helpful about this map was it was helpful to get around from Europe. So good for traveling from Europe. Again, feel free to put that in your own words. The limitations. So what might be not helpful about this map? So here I have to look at the map and I really have to make some inferences. And over here, I'm gonna highlight Africa on my map or underline it or circle it. And if you want, you might wanna trace Africa. And I'm also gonna trace Greenland, which we looked at yesterday. And we know when we looked at Greenland on a globe, it was way smaller than Africa. But this map that good old Gerardus made makes Greenland and Africa look the same size. So that is not helpful. So here I'm gonna write the size is wrong. That is very unhelpful about this map. I'm also gonna write a note that says Africa is too small. When I'm thinking about bias, I'm noticing that Europe is right in the middle of this map. So I'm gonna circle Europe. It's right in the middle of my map. And that makes sense, right? Because his purpose was to help sailors travel around from Europe. So I'm gonna draw an arrow here. They were sailing to North America to colonize or take over. They were sailing to Mexico to colonize or take over. They were sailing to Africa to colonize or take over. So that tells me that he has some bias. He put Europe right in the middle of his map. But I guess that makes sense because he's from Europe, so it makes sense he'd have some bias towards Europe. Another thing that stuck out to me about this source that made it unreliable was that Mercator lived during a time of European expansion and colonization. And I'm going to put here the word bias, because he lived 500 years ago, and we know that people had really different belief 500 years ago. And he was a white guy from Europe, and he lived during European expansion and colonization. He helped with that. That's why he made this map. So I know that means that he thought Europe was better than everyone else. So that's something that's not quite so reliable about him. Awesome job. We have finished source number 1. Make sure you've highlighted. Make sure you've annotated, so you're writing these little notes. And you've written your notes over here just like a historian. Take about a 4-minute brain break after you've finished. The expectation during the brain break is that you are seated at your desk. After 4 minutes, we're going to move on to source number 2. If for some reason you didn't finish source number 1, we'll leave this on the board.